What's up, everybody? This is Gabor Racz from Budapest, Hungary. You can call me Gabs, and I'm your online marketing expert for this month. So welcome to another mentor session here inside Accelerator's organization. We have a bunch of great questions for today, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first question comes from Trent Phyllis, and their question is, how can I effectively advertise while on a budget? Business description and background. I work in commercial real estate and specialize in medical dental offices and clinics. My company consists of myself and my father, who has worked in the industry for more than 25 years. I've come to find that his business primarily revolves around referrals, and while this works for him, it does not work for someone like myself who is new in the industry. We don't have a large corporate size budget, so expensive SEO options and similarly pricey tools are hard to justify. I know advertising is of huge importance and want to utilize it however I can, but I'd like to do so while staying under a budget of about $15,000 a year or less. So isn't this what all of us would like to do? We would all like a bunch of leads, a bunch of new business, but not really spend a lot on advertising. So yeah, with that said, that's kind of, it's kind of a dream that works for some people, but I just want to get your expectations on point right from the beginning that you may have to spend a bit more to achieve your goals than you're currently thinking about. But anyway, let me give you a couple of tools that you can start using to wrap your head around this. So first of all, when we're talking about advertising, the goal of advertising, if we're talking about online marketing specifically, is to get a lot of traffic, meaning people like you and me, onto your website, where hopefully you're actually trying to get them to take some kind of valuable action, whether that is to sign up for a consultation or your email list, whether it's to become a client or to sell them something. Basically, the goal of all online advertising is to get somebody, and as many people as we possibly can, onto your website or sales page. With that said, with that being the goal, there's really two different ways for you if you are new in the industry and you don't already have an audience. There's really two different ways to get traffic. So number one is traffic that you pay for. This is what your question is already about. So you can basically go to all of the big networks, like you can go to Facebook, you can go to Google. More recently, you can go to TikTok. Obviously, Instagram is included with Facebook as well. And you can pay them as little or as much as you want. Your results are going to be pretty much determined by the amount of budget you have and how well your creative actually fits inside the whole ecosystem. And I'll get back to that point in a bit later. So the other way you can get traffic is you can actually work for it. This is traffic that you earn. And you might already see that, basically your choice of which one you're going to be going for really depends on whether you have more money or more time available to you. So, if you are, let's say, just starting out and you don't have a lot of budget for advertising yet, no problem, because you can, if you put in the work, if you have sweat equity and you're willing to actually spend a lot of time, frankly, every single week onto generating traffic yourself, and I'll get into how you can actually do that practically, then you don't have to advertise a lot. Whereas, if you have more money, which based on your question may not be the case here, you can skip a lot of the work and just go and pay for traffic. Just, it's pay to play basically. But yeah, what do I mean when I talk about traffic that you earn? Think about it this way. All of your dream customers are already congregating somewhere. Like when you look at all these other people that have audiences, it's possible for you to actually get access to those audiences. And this might be like, if you have, and by the way, for this strategy, you should be very familiar with what kind of content your dream customers actually consume. So, you're in commercial real estate. That's not really my area of expertise. But, I would definitely start by looking at, hey, what kind of podcasts do my customers listen to? What kind of YouTube channels do they watch? What kind of magazines do they read? If you want to go into the more traditional advertising networks as well, what kind of, maybe even live events do they go to? And so you have all these different places where, somebody else has already created an audience of people that are likely to be great customers for you. When we talk about traffic that you earn, basically you need to put in the work of actually building relationships with the people that have already built these audiences. And, this might be, for example, if that's somebody who has created a podcast that many of your dream customers listen to, then your job would be to try and become a guest on that podcast and contribute value to the podcast that actually makes sense for the host to feature you, something that makes sense for the audience to listen to, something that you're basically providing value with, and essentially also building up your own authority, your own expertise. And at the end, if you're featured on a podcast, you usually get the opportunity, like the host is going to ask you at the end, like, hey, where can people find out more about you? And that's where you can actually direct them to your website. Very similar if you're featured on a YouTube channel, very similar if you, let's say, write a guest article on a blog or in a magazine. So, basically traffic that you earn is all about building relationships with people that have already congregated audiences of your dream customers. And, this takes a lot of work. Me personally, this is not my preferred strategy. I prefer to spend on advertising, but I also have, a number of friends that have done this very well. I also have a number of friends that are actually audience congregators, so other people either pay them or try and work their way in to get featured on their shows. But that's something you can do if you don't want to advertise a lot. The other thing I would encourage you to look at is good advertising should essentially pay for itself. And what I mean by that is, if you really understand the process of how to advertise online, then you really don't have an advertising budget. Because think about it this way. If you spend, your preferred budget of $15,000 a year, and, as you're spending it on a weekly basis, let's say $15,000 divided by, let's say you spend it for 50 weeks, that's $300 a week. Okay, so let's say you spend $300 a week. Now, assuming that you know exactly that within 2 weeks of spending that $300, or even within a month of spending that $300, you will have $600 coming back, $900 coming back, whatever that number might be for you. Assuming you know these numbers and you have actually proven the process of the fact that you can actually generate those numbers on a recurring and predictable basis, wouldn't you want to spend $600, $900, or $9,000 instead of the $300 per week if your results are scalable? So, think about it this way. If you really understand the way online advertising works, you do not have an advertising budget, because your goal then becomes, how can I humanly spend the most amount of money possible while, still keeping my ROI intact? Because I want to spend as much as possible, assuming I can handle the new business, handle the new clients, all of that. And, this is something that I would actually encourage a lot of people here in the group to start looking at. If you want to understand how the whole advertising game works online, this is the Bible that I have used myself. Like, you probably saw the ads for this book online. Like, this is just the best online marketing book you can get. And I would really highly encourage you to read this. I have, 0 affiliate commissions or whatever, but I recommend this book to everybody, because everything I do in online marketing essentially comes from this book. I just read it and kind of repurposed it for what we are doing here in our tiny Eastern European country. But, I'm thinking if it works for me, it's going to work for you as well. And what I would encourage you to look at when you're reading this book is to try and look for those spots where it really explains, the system, the process of how advertising should work in order for it to pay for itself. And that really goes essentially beyond the scope of today's mentor session. We could talk about this topic for an hour or two. Maybe we should do one of those sessions in the group once or twice. But basically, this is all about designing a sales funnel online where you have predictable results. You know that if you get 100 people to come onto this sales page or lead generation page, you know exactly what percentage of them are going to become leads. You know what percentage of them are going to become customers within X amount of time. And so if you know those numbers, then, the amount of advertising you spend on really just becomes kind of an input to the output of customers that you're really trying to get. So yeah, this is something we could talk about a lot, but I would really prefer if you read this book first, because then we have a lot of shared vocabulary and shared common experience, let's say, that we can actually discuss and figure out, like, okay, how can those principles actually apply to your business specifically? Now, with this said, I would also like to point out one very important thing. These days in 2022 and already in the last couple of days, social media and online advertising in general, it kind of feels like every single business owner feels the absolute need that they must do advertising, they must do social media, as if it was another tax that their business had to pay. It's actually kind of like that. Like a lot of businesses that see no results whatsoever from social media after even years of implementing the same strategy, they still keep on churning out the content because they've kind of been told, like, hey, it's part of being a business owner, like you need to be on social media. And something I would like to point out is, while social media and advertising online in general can have really great results, they are not a must. And it's entirely possible, depending on what your goals might be, that, spending your time on social media and spending your money on advertising may not be the fastest way for you to reach your goals, especially inside the B2B sector that you are in. I would really recommend, aside from obviously reading my favorite book here, I would really also recommend that you set up a call with Tom Black. He's a mentor here inside the group, and he would be the most highly qualified person here to actually help you figure out a more traditional sales strategy. Because, and I'm saying this as, a new generation, 100% online marketing kind of guy, but for a lot of businesses, especially in the B2B sector, picking up the phone and setting up an appointment and actually presenting your service may be a much faster way to get to your goals than, trying and setting up ads and posting on social media. So yeah, I would really encourage you to look at this book to see, kind of my world of how I would do it, and then also to look at Tom's world, because it's two different approaches towards the same problem. You may end up with a kind of hybrid approach where you do traditional sales and you do online marketing as well. They can be actually very effective and complementary if used together, but you may not need both actually to get started. So just to kind of speak against myself for a second here as well. And yep, Kristen is asking, can I say the name of the book again? Yep, it was .com Secrets. And actually, I would recommend that you get the whole trilogy. Like, I have these here on my desk, like, all the time, and I use these as kind of like reference manuals. I think I read this one the first time, I don't know, like 5 years ago or something, and I still find new things inside of it. So it's like, it's just online marketing gold. Absolutely the best. So next question comes from Greg Mandil, and their question is, what are the best ways to create a more consistent sales pipeline? Business description and background. I'm a web design and development company. I network, I get referrals from my partners along with my current clients, and I get traffic through my website. Excuse me. That flow is not steady enough, and I'd like to figure out a way to get more leads without spending on advertising. Do you have any suggestions about channels that I am missing? Okay, so this is actually a very similar question to the last one, which was about getting more leads, getting more business online without spending a lot on advertising. So Greg, the first thing I would recommend for you to do is to actually go back to the beginning of this mentor session and just watch through the entire answer that I gave to Trent, because a lot of those principles are going to apply to your business as well. I would also very, very highly recommend the same books that I recommended to Trent to you as well, especially if you are actually inside the whole website building, funnel building, design space. Like, these would be highly, highly relevant to you if you haven't read them already. But with that said, let me try and give you some additional tips that I didn't mention in my previous answer. So if you go back to the previous question, I talked about traffic that you earn and traffic that you pay for. And one thing that I think I didn't mention there was, this new, well, it's not really new anymore. It's been around for a couple of years, but still, most people are just taking notice. So this new platform called TikTok. And, most people still think like, oh, it's not a serious platform. You just have like, a bunch of kids fooling around and doing like stupid dances and whatever. Like, I have actually, and by the way, I used to be in that camp as well. Like, I was like, I just advertise on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, Google. I don't need this TikTok. But actually, very recently, I just had a partnership with a friend of mine who's a large influencer here inside Hungary. And he has actually built some fairly successful businesses on TikTok alone. And one of the things that I found very fascinating about working with him is like, I come from a very advertising heavy kind of world where, I don't spend a lot of my time and energy on producing content. I spend a lot more of my energy on figuring out how to profitably spend on advertising. But, the different way that he handled his business was that he basically spent no money whatsoever on advertising. He only produced TikTok videos. And he actually had a really great strategy for how to produce content on TikTok, which, by the way, he just figured it out by looking at other people's TikTok videos. So, if you are inside the web development space or web design space, I would encourage you to look at, what are the most successful TikTokers who have website development agencies or any kind of marketing agency, actually, for that matter. What kind of content are they producing and what kind of results are they getting? Because chances are you could actually look at their content and start to model some of that. I'm not saying copy, notice that. I'm not saying copy, I'm not saying clone, I'm not saying rip off. I'm saying be inspired by people that have had success in your industry on a specific platform and see how you could, basically create your own interpretation of the kind of trends that you see within their content. And the reason I'm saying TikTok specifically, and by the way, I haven't been on TikTok before, but I'm going to be going very heavy on it starting in September. So, this is something that I'm going to be drinking my own Kool-Aid as well. Whatever that means. Like, I've never seen a Kool-Aid here in Hungary, actually. You can tell me in the comments what that is. I just know the figure of speech. Anyway, cultural differences, I guess. So anyway, the reason I'm talking about TikTok is something you have to see about social media platforms in general is that they go through these different phases. And what I mean by that is when a platform is new, they basically provide incentives for people to use the platform. And that doesn't only mean users, it also means content producers, it also means companies. And the way social media platforms incentivize producers and companies to use them is they give them tons of organic reach. And as an agency owner, you may be familiar with this term, but for those of you that may not be, I'll explain this as well. So when we talk about organic reach, it's like I post something on Facebook, I post a video on TikTok. How many people will this piece of content reach without me having to spend dollars on advertising? And more specifically, what percentage of my audience is this going to reach? So for example, my business has a Facebook page with about 75,000 followers, and my organic reach is only about 3,500. So that would be about 5% of my audience. That means the other 95%, even though they follow me on Facebook, or more specifically my company, not much to see here, but anyway. So they follow my company on Facebook, but I don't reach them. Like I have to pay to actually reach them. But it wasn't always like that. Like if we went back 5 years, if we went back 10 years, there used to be very high organic reach on Facebook as well. Same thing happened on Instagram as well. Like if you went back 5 years, if you had 20,000 followers, you posted something on Instagram, chances are a very high percentage of your followers would see that piece of content. But nowadays, you post something, you have 20,000 followers, maybe 200, 300, 400 people are going to see it, unless you're like, a highly successful content creator. And the reason this happens is in the beginning stage, when a new social media network is launching, they are essentially giving you a lot of organic reach to incentivize you to spend more time on the platform, more energy on the platform, in the hopes that, you basically get addicted to the platform, at which point, when they have enough people, when they have like critical mass of companies and producers and consumers as well on the platform, they actually start tapering away your organic reach, and you end up starting to pay to reach your own audience as well as people beyond that audience. And this goes back to me suggesting TikTok right now. TikTok is still in the stage where you have very high organic reach. So, my friend who taught me about TikTok, he actually just launched a new business. He had no audience for that business. He had an audience of his own, but he had no audience for the page of that business. And within a couple of tries, and keep in mind, like we are in a country of 10 million people that speak our language. Within, I think within a week of launching that business, he had one video on TikTok, which had been viewed by more than 1 million people. Now imagine that, that's 10% of our entire country's population. And he didn't pay a single dollar for advertising. So that's what got me really excited about this platform actually, and kind of got me to appreciate the opportunity that we have right now, which is that if you don't want to spend on advertising, I would really look at, what are the kind of younger platforms coming out. Right now it's TikTok, but I would also keep my eyes open for like, what kind of new opportunities might be out there, and looking at what the top content producers in my niche are doing, and then investing my time and energy heavily onto becoming an expert on that platform and figuring out how to create content that then drives traffic to my website or sales funnel. Because again, at the end of the day, you're just looking for traffic. You will either work for that traffic or you're going to pay for that traffic. It's one of those two ways. Obviously, a combination of both would be best. But yep, that's what I got for you. Also see my question or my answer to the previous question. And I think that should give you a pretty good direction to get started. All right, the next question also comes from Greg Mandil. And this question is, how do you do market research, business description, and background? I'd like to get a competitive analysis of what I charge versus what my competitors charge. I've tried price shopping, but my main product is websites, and finding out what my competitors charge isn't easy. They need to set up a consult call and ask me lots of questions. Is there a way to do this for other similar companies in my area so I can find out if I'm not charging enough. I'm gonna give you an answer, but it's not gonna be exactly what you were looking for, maybe. But I think it's gonna be hopefully very helpful. Personally, like I've always hated to look at my competitors' pricing. And the reason for that is whenever I tried to compare myself to anybody else, it just took away a lot of my freedom. Like it put my creativity into this box where I'm like this is the maximum I can charge, and no one's gonna pay me more. Like, how do you know that your competitors have figured out their pricing? Like maybe they could be charging 3 times as much, they just don't have the guts to do it. Like that could be entirely possible. It's entirely possible that you're actually way better at what you do than they are. Like, how do you know the quality of service that they provide versus the quality of your service? How do you know, if they know exactly who their dream customer is and what their needs are, and whether they have actually tailored their services to the needs of those customers? So, for me personally, I cannot give you a direct answer to this question because, like I have no idea what my competitors charge. Like sometimes I look at it, but it doesn't really affect my decisions. Like I charge for my products what I think they're worth. And, whenever I raise my prices, somehow I see like demand actually increases. So I don't know, maybe I should just keep raising them. But I guess, the point that I'm trying to make here is instead of focusing on your competitors and what kind of prices you might find in the marketplace, whatever that might mean in, you're looking at a highly saturated market with thousands upon thousands of agencies and freelancers all creating websites. And you're going to find, if you start trying to research your competition, you'll find that you have just a huge spectrum of different prices. Like you can go on Fiverr and someone will create a website for you for $15, and then you have some huge agencies that will charge you $500,000. Like there's just a huge spectrum. Like how do you know where you're going to fit? So I would really encourage you to start focusing on instead on your own product or service and your own customers and what their needs are and how you can actually fill those needs. Like all of the energy you would spend looking at your competitors, I think would be much better spent looking at the needs of your clients and servicing those needs. I'm actually someone who has, for our country and our industry, I have spent a huge amount of money on creating a website, and I have spent a lot of money with different agencies. So I'm actually kind of in the field where, I'm essentially someone who could be your customer. And, I have spent way more than I thought I would ever spend on a website, simply because the agency that I work with has consistently produced results. They got the work done. Like I have worked with some agencies in the past that were cheap, but they never came through. They were never on deadline. The site never looked the way I wanted it to look. It never worked the way I wanted it to work. Whereas with this agency, yeah, they charge 10 times as much, but everything's done on deadline. Everything looks great. Everything works great. I don't have to stress about it. I don't have to micromanage every single thing. They keep me updated on a weekly basis. They come to me with new ideas. And by the way, that's if you already have a project, that this is the reason essentially I spent way more with them than I was originally planning. Like, yeah, I gave them the specifications, like, hey, this is what I want to do. But, on top of giving me a proposal, like, hey, this is how we'll get this done, they invited me to a bunch of brainstormings to their office. They invited, a bunch of different experts from within their team, whether that's on the design front, whether that's the backend database, whether that's on, the whole funnel strategy side of things. And, they just kept giving me new ideas which then they're like, by the way, hey, we can actually implement this as well. So, I would really start looking, instead of looking at what you can charge for a kind of project in a box, I would really start asking your clients more questions, figuring out what their needs are, and then coming to them with ideas of how those needs can be met, even in addition to the project scope that they have given you. And guess what? If you're the one coming up with the idea, it's 99.9% sure that you're going to be the agency who's also fulfilling on that idea. And that's where you can actually start charging much more. So this is kind of my 2 cents from the other side. So I'm a customer of an agency, and this is how, I was very happy to spend a lot of money with them. And, I hope that this might work for you as well. Okay, next question also comes from Greg Mandil. The question is, should I set up KPIs for my business? Yes. And why? Business description and background. I'm a web design and development company. I've been introduced to KPIs, but I don't currently use them. How can they help me better organize my business, and what KPIs should I focus on? I love this question, and obviously, yes, you need to have KPIs in your business, because otherwise, how do you set goals? Like, KPIs are really just the foundational block for you to set SMART goals, and you probably know what SMART goals are, but if you don't, then you can look that up. It's an acronym, SMART goals, and basically KPIs are what make SMART goals measurable. Because I'm like, yeah, I want to grow my company. What does that mean? And that's where KPIs kind of come into play. Like, okay, like if my goal is to become, let's say your goal is to become a 7-figure business, which would be, let's say, I need to achieve revenue of $1 million in one fiscal year. That would actually be one KPI, total revenue. And you can kind of work either backwards from there, or even from the other side, like figuring out, the kind of projects that you currently have, and work your way up from there. But, let me actually go into a more practical side of this. Like, what kind of KPIs would I set up for your specific business? Just keep this in mind. Like, the goal with KPIs is to make your overall business goals and objectives measurable, so that you actually have something that, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of every quarter, or at the end of the year, you can actually track the progress that you have made. So you are a web design and development agency, I guess. I would actually have 2 different sets of KPIs that I would use for a business like yours. I would have lead generation KPIs, and I would have overall business or high-level KPIs. Let me start with the latter. So, your high-level overall business KPIs. I would look at the number of projects that you want. I would look at revenue per project, profit per project, total revenue, and total profit. Like, those would be my 5 main business KPIs. And, these are all very kind of interrelated, because the number of projects that you service, and the revenue per project, and also kind of the cost per project, because we're looking at profitability as well, those are really going to determine your total revenue and total profit KPIs as well. So I'm like, hey, if my goal is to become a $1 million company, and right now I have 100 projects during the year, which all come out around $1,000 per project. Okay, like my total revenue is 100 grand. And now I can either look at increasing the number of projects that I have, or I can look at increasing the revenue per projects that I achieve. And, this was only talking about revenue, so we can also take into account profitability. So like, if my revenue per project is $1,000 and my profit per project is 300, one thing I could look at is like, how can I optimize some of my costs so that my profit margin on that project actually goes up. So these are the high-level KPIs that I would use. And by the way, once you have these KPIs, the next thing is to kind of start brainstorming. Like I would just open a notebook and write each KPI on each page and just start brainstorming like, hey, what could I actually do to improve this KPI? So if I'm looking at number of projects, like, okay, that goes into the traffic side of things, like, all kinds of lead generation, actually converting those leads, but we'll get into that in a minute. If I was looking at revenue per project, I would actually look at like, hey, what are additional services I could sell to these clients? What are upselling strategies or cross-selling strategies I could use with these clients? And so I would really base all of my brainstorming around those KPIs because, I think most of us business owners are actually very guilty of just doing so much unnecessary fluff within our business that actually have, zero impact on our most important KPIs. And so, just brainstorming around these is going to be very, very helpful. And also making sure that whenever you evaluate a decision, whether that's, taking on a new project, whether that's, investing in, maybe team members, maybe equipment, like whenever you're making business decisions, I would recommend that you base them on whether or not you think those decisions are going to have a positive impact on your chosen KPIs. But anyway, so those were the overall business KPIs that I would use for a business like yours. And then I would also look at the lead generation side of things. And for lead generation, I would recommend sales page traffic. I would recommend conversion rate, number of leads, and percentage of leads that turn into projects. And let me explain each one of these. So whenever you're driving traffic, and we talked about this during a previous question, whether that's paid traffic or traffic that you earned, you're essentially driving them to a website or a sales funnel. I would prefer a sales funnel, by the way, but anyway, you're driving them to a web page online where your goal essentially is for them to become a lead. Now, that could be signing up for your email list. It could be applying for a consultation. It could be like a whole bunch of things. Again, if you read the book that I recommended, you'll learn a lot about lead generation in general and what kind of things you can do to turn people into leads. But, going back to the KPI side of things, the first KPI is like how many people per day or per week, whatever your chosen time frame is, just don't make it longer than a week. Like, just don't. Like, I prefer to look at daily or weekly. How many people actually visit my site? How many people become leads on that website? And the division of these two numbers is going to give you your conversion rate. And then, let's say I have 1,000 people visiting my website during a week, and 50 of those apply for, phone call consultation, or they sign up for my lead magnet. So that would be 50 divided by 1,000. So I have a 5% conversion rate on that website. And let's say 10% of those people end up becoming clients. I end up getting projects from those. So there I would have a 10% conversion rate on the second step of my funnel. And again, the same strategy. Once you know these numbers and you're actively measuring them, you can now start brainstorming like, okay, what can I do to increase traffic to my website? That would be sales page traffic KPI. What can I do to improve my conversion rate from 5% to 15%? Because, if you actually do that, then for the same 1,000 visitors that, let's say you spend $1 per click to get those 1,000 people onto your website, if you 3x your conversion rate, then you just got 100 additional leads for the same amount of ad spend that you used to spend on. So this is how you can actually start tweaking the results of your advertising online. And so again, just like the same example, I would look at now this gives you a very specific focus of, if I just start searching online, like now I know like what to search, like how do I improve the conversion rate of my sales page? And they will have a million different articles that can give you a bunch of new ideas that you can actually start testing. So in a nutshell, these are the way I would recommend you use KPIs, and these are the specific KPIs I would first implement in a similar business. Like obviously there could be more KPIs, but for where you're probably at right now, and yeah, just based on the type of business that you have, these are the ones that I would focus on in the beginning. And as you grow, you can actually start implementing more KPIs, especially as you start bringing on more team members. Like you might have more KPIs within the finance space once you actually have an in-house chief financial officer or bookkeeper. You might have more marketing type of KPIs once you actually have an in-house marketing team, or whether you are working with an agency. But this number of KPIs I think is ideal for if it's just you or if it's a small team that you are working with. Okay, I hope that helps. Final question comes from Michael Wilding. Their question is, which is overall a better project management platform, Trello or Monday or something else? Business description and background. My company is trying to decide which project management software to help us move forward faster. Monday is currently about $5 per month more than Trello. The project manager we hired has experience with Trello, but I and the other owner only have limited experience with Monday. Is one better than the other? So for this question, I would really recommend you go with whichever the staff member that's going to be using it the most has the most experience with, because you're going to hit the ground running much faster, and they will be able to give you, both of these software, and I have used both actually. Both Monday and Trello have way more features than what you are very likely to actually start using. And the learning curve can be kind of steep if you want to become a kind of advanced user. Now, if you already have somebody on your team that is at least like semi-professional or something at using one of these pieces of software, it's just going to be a much bigger ROI for you for them to actually start using that software and working, because it's really not about the $5 difference between the monthly fee of the software. I think the time of your employee, and even more importantly yourself, is going to be a much bigger drain on your resources than that extra 5, 10, 15, whatever dollars it is. Because if you make them use a software they don't already know how to use, they're going to be spending their working hours on learning how to use that software. And it might take them a fair bit of time just to get to the same level in Monday.com that they already had within Trello. And you also have the opportunity cost of, during the time when they are learning about this new software, they are not actively using it. They are not actively working on solving your business problems. So, the time of your employees and yourself is hugely more valuable than the cost of whatever software on a monthly basis. So, my recommendation is just go with the software that, the people that will use it have the more familiarity and the more experience with. So with that, we are actually wrapping up this Q&A for today. I hope this has been helpful to all of you listening. This was actually, I think, my second mentor session, but I think I'm kind of getting in the groove, so maybe number 3 is going to be the charm. Yep, if you have any follow-up questions, please post them in the comments here in the Facebook group. I will make sure to keep looking at those comments for a couple of days. And yep, I hope you have an awesome day wherever you are in the world. Bye.